In this video, we are going to take a close look at the unique Nikon Coolpix P950. Your cell phone has no chance in competing with the incredible zoom range of the Nikon P950. This video will include many photo and video examples, including birding, people watching in the city, astrophotography, and other creative uses for this type of zoom lens. We're going to address some important features of the camera, like stabilization. Is it good enough for a lens this long? We'll test it out in less than optimal lighting conditions. And how significant is that extra reach of the P1000 over the P950? A lot of people are struggling between which of the two cameras to get, so we're going to address that question. You'll be seeing plenty of photo examples too in this video. We'll discuss some fun features of the camera you may not have known about. From 21 floors up, can you read the name tags on the New York Marathon runners? And if you stick around long enough till the end, I'll show you how I make a complete fool of myself using the super zoom capabilities of this camera. All is possible, and I'm going to show you what this camera can actually do, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I do have another video on the P1000 too if you want to check that out. But the P950 has an 83 times zoom, now with 4K recording. So not only can you zoom in on people, but it's nuts! Your favorite animals too, and look how sharp it is. The P950 has 16 megapixels in its sensor and weighs in at almost 2¼ pounds. Not real light and small, especially when you compare it to other point-and-shoot cameras. Sometimes when you're out, you see people with these big lenses and you realize how heavy it is to carry that, not to mention how expensive it is, and how the P950 gets that all in such a small package. One of the big features the 950 improves upon over the 900 is 4K 30 video. It also adds a much brighter and bigger viewfinder, and that's really important because you're going to use that more often for shooting because of the stability. Like the P1000 and 900 before it, it comes with a nice fold-out LCD screen. But the P1000 zoom range, it goes out to 3,000 millimeters. It really is an incredible reach. I mean, that is 50% more than 2,000 millimeters, right? So the question is that 3,000 millimeters worth it? Should you go and spend a little more money? So compared to the P1000, can the P950 zoom cut it? Sorry, you're going to hear a lot of corny jokes in this video, so I hope you're prepared for that. So why don't we take a look at some real-world examples of 2,000 millimeters versus 3,000 millimeters, so you can get to see what the difference really is and how it translates in the real world. So with his permission, we're going to use this fisherman as an example of the zoom differences. Here he is at 2,000 millimeter focal length, and here he is at a 3,000 millimeter focal length. Now, at first blush, it really doesn't seem like it's that much of a difference from the 3 to the 2. He's about 30, 40 feet away, so let's try the test on something much further. This sign is 2 city blocks away. This is 2,000 millimeters, and this is 3,000 millimeters. Actually, it seems like even a smaller difference, and just to prove it to you, I'll show you through the LCD screen 2,000 millimeters, and we just went to 3,000 millimeters. And here are photos showing the difference of 2,000 versus 3,000. And again, this sign is pretty far away, much like you might use if you were shooting wildlife off in the distance. So for giggles, let's take a look at 1,000, how that compares to 2,000. Is it a small difference too? Actually, it's a much bigger difference, which makes sense mathematically. To me, I was a little surprised by this test because intuitively, I would have thought that the difference from 2,000 to 3,000 would still be very apparent. But you can be the judge and you can determine whether the extra size and weight and heft of the P1000's extra zoom lens is worth it based on what you just saw. Now, just to be technical, this is not a full-frame camera, so the actual zoom range is really 4.3 to 357 millimeters. But we say 24 to 2,000 millimeters just to keep it in equivalent full-frame terms so we can compare apples to apples. So when you hear me reference the focal length in millimeters, you'll know that it's an equivalent full-frame focal length. Either way, it's still an 83 times range from 24 on the wide end all the way to a whopping 2,000 up close and everywhere in between.
Burst my bubble, pun intended.
In addition to the front of the camera, there's a zoom on the side. That's a control ring for manual focus, and you can also customize it. But the zoom does make a noise. Now listen closely in a quiet room. The camera's HDMI port can output a clean signal with a maximum of 1080p resolution, and there's also a microphone jack as well. And the snapback button helps you if you lost your subject because you were zoomed in too tight. The front zoom rocker is a variable speed zoom, so pressing it slow goes nice and slow, and then increasing pressure goes faster. But the side switch is not. In addition to shooting things far away, you can shoot things really up close with the macro lens. The lens is top-notch, as we should expect from a camera bearing the Nikon name. Look at these different focal length examples. The image stays sharp and clear, and you really can see details with this lens like a microscope. The superior minimum focusing distance coupled with the high power zoom really allows you to see details in objects that you could not normally see with other cameras. Look at those feet.
All right, foot fetish it is.
Now naturally this is a small sensor camera, so you're not going to be able to get that background blur. Or are you? Yes, you can with the long zoom. Now I want to show you another neat feature about this camera. When you're at full zoom, like on a city street crowded with a lot of people, it gives the impression of like a major megalopolis with thousands of people walking on the street. It's called the compression effect, and you see it a lot in the movies, but it's a trick. Look, as I zoom out, the street really is not that crowded. It's just that I was zoomed in all the way tight, so the people in the background look like they're really close to the people in the foreground. And this is a real creative way to use this type of lens. I also want to add that most of the shots in this video are handheld. I did not use a tripod. Actually, you really need a really heavy-duty tripod to use this camera, because even a little bit of wind will shake it if it's on like a rinky-dinky tripod. Thought was put into the tripod attachment with both a screw and an attachment for the pin, and in a good spot because the camera is pretty front heavy.
Slow, faster.
But considering how tight you can really get on this camera, I find the stabilization really does a remarkable job, all things considered. Now, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, what's she thinking? Look, Ma, look at my brand new tattoo. Would never have noticed that if I wasn't zoomed in people watching with the P950.
Yeah. Tattoo?
Now, just as a word of caution, if you want to use this camera to people watch, you can. I found someone interesting here using a vintage camcorder as I test that type of equipment on my channel. But I think he actually noticed me for a second, and you'll be able to see as I freeze the frame here. But it was okay, no problems ensued. He was cool about it. However, on another occasion, I was zooming in on this lady. I found her hat to be very interesting. Even though I was far away, though, I guess, sometimes you have that feeling when people are watching you. And maybe she had that feeling because when she turned around, oops, she noticed me, and she really didn't look too happy about it. Uh-oh, now what do I do?
Busted.
She wanted me to go over to her, and I had to defuse this situation, so it took a strange twist, actually. Take a look.
Is that a Nikon P950?
Actually, it is, yes.
Oh, I'd like that.
Okay, that's my mother. So from over 20 stories up, the zoom is not quite so powerful that we can actually read what she's writing, but we can read what he's reading. The Latecomer by Jean Hanff Corlitz, a layered and immersive literary novel about 3 siblings. Wow, we learned a lot thanks to the P950. Is the zoom strong enough to see what airline this is? I don't think so. Well, let's try freezing the frame and then tightening up. We can. Imagine if we could see inside.
By the way, is there anyone on board who knows how to fly a plane?
Now that's kind of a bad commotion on the plane, but let's shoot some good commotion. I mentioned we're going to shoot the New York Marathon runners, and from all the way up, Here's what you could see with that incredible 2000 millimeter zoom. You can even see the onlookers cheering the runners on. And here are some of the lead female runners, tight enough to read the name and to see the individual's muscles move and flex during the run. This car is always in front of the lead runners. You can even see the individual LED bulbs in the timer were so tight. And coming up is the lead runner, and actually the guy who won the New York Marathon himself. Coming up, First Avenue in New York City, and the Nikon P950 can read his name tag very clearly. This was the actual winner of the marathon as he passes by a little in and out of focus, but he is going kind of fast in all fairness. And a little later in the afternoon, you have all the runners come by, and it's really quite a sight to see. Now, this camera can actually do a lot of fast motion and slow motion tricks, and let me show you some of those and how that works. There is an option for 4 times slow motion, but it is in very reduced standard definition quality. If you want a little higher slow motion, there is a 50% slow-mo in HD. If you want to speed things up and make the runners seem like they're going faster than they normally are, here it is in 2 times. This is at 720p resolution. The camera gives several presets to shoot time-lapse if you want to do 10 minutes or 25 minutes, etc., but you can customize all those. And the camera stitches everything together for you. It'll take a successive series of pictures for a designated amount of time, and then in the end, you've got yourself a very cool-looking time-lapse in 1080p quality, but very effective, and you don't have to really do any work. The camera does it for you. If you have a 4K TV, please watch this section on that.
This is how it looks in 1080-30. This is how it looks in 1080-30. This is how it looks at 1080-60. 1080-60.
And here is the scene in 4K 30, the maximum resolution of the 950. A cool feature of the camera is while you're shooting 4K video, every time you hit the shutter button, you can actually take a very nice looking 4K photo while you're in video mode recording. The camera has a few preset modes like bird watching. When you're in that mode and hit the OK button, it will zoom you up to 500 millimeters, which is very convenient, and you could always change that afterwards. Here are some birding examples with the P950. And I was shooting through a window, so it doesn't look as contrasty as sharp, but the pictures still came out very nice and very detailed. Now, I didn't exactly go into the wild with this camera. Well, maybe you consider New York City the wild these days, but here they are in their natural habitat in the city. Here is a pigeon on a ledge. I really never get bored of going from full wide to telephoto and seeing how much more detail you could see and what your eye cannot make out. See all these birds on this traffic light.
What do you suppose they're saying?
They're saying pay attention to the autofocus in this scene because the camera is going to lose the subject. And this is what happens. This is not a phase detect autofocus system, but there is a trick. I recommend you engage the autofocus lock. When you're recording, you will see the AFL indicator to push this circle to the left. If you do that, it will keep the focus locked. So when you're in focus when recording video, I highly recommend you do that. Here it is not engaged, and you can see that the subject is pulsing a little bit. By the way, why is he carrying his suitcase when it has wheels? I don't know. You'll notice the autofocus struggles, especially when you're in the long end of the telephoto range and there are distractions. You notice how it's not staying locked on the subject. This is very common with this camera, so get accustomed to that manual focus wheel number 1 if you want to use manual focus, or better yet, like in this scene, you have the autofocus lock engaged and you can see how it stays on the subject. It does not veer off. You see, notice the opportunity for it to lose focus on these poles, but it stays locked on her.
All right, that makes sense. But somebody didn't get the memo.
P950 might be perfect if you're a private eye or a jealous boyfriend or girlfriend. Like, what's she looking at on her phone? And the P950's powerful 2000 millimeter zoom can help you get it really close. And wait a minute, is that a P950 she's looking to buy too? What?
Nice try.
Okay, we know the camera has an amazing zoom, but can it serve as an all-around camera to take great photos? Here are some JPEGs straight from camera with no editing. Care to take a guess what street this photo was taken on?
Trick question.
There's actually a mode called panorama mode, which I actually find can work pretty well. This is best used if there's no movement in the scene and you need to go wider than 24 millimeters.
What about the moon?
Now, what about the moon, you ask? The 950 delivers. Even during the day, you get a really nice image of the less than full moon where you can see the craters in the shadows. And here's a still shot taken at night. Now, earlier in the year, we had a fairly rare astronomical event in the New York area called a full buck moon, but I thought it was called the super moon or the blood moon, but whatever you call it, the moon appeared particularly large and bright that night. So I figured I'd use the 950 to get some shots of it. You'd be better off using a sturdy tripod so you can get more rock-solid photos. There's the moon mode in the camera, sets it up properly for video and photo, sets up the focus and some of the exposure to get better shots of the moon. So how is this camera going to do in less than optimal lighting conditions? How is it going to do in low light with the small cell phone size sensor? And remember, the aperture of the lens is fairly slow. So as you zoom in, expect things to get darker quickly. When you compare the Nikon to other super zoom cameras, I found it does fairly well. Now take a look at this soccer field in the distance. This is at really full zoom with the Nikon P950. I want you to compare this to another super zoom. This is the Canon SX70, which I reviewed. And look at the larger, more disturbing grain. It's kind of ugly. Compared to the Nikon is a lot cleaner. Now you notice that ugly grain in the Canon footage, whereas here in the Nikon footage you still have the velvety black sky despite it being really dark. Notice how well it picks up the colors in that building. Nicely differentiated, nice and bright. I think it does very well in low light, all considering. Now here's another example, again the worst possible case. Full zoom, very low light situation. You do see some grain for sure, but it's really not terribly objectionable. Hey, actually, it sort of gives me a little bit of an appetite. But again, here is the incredible zoom of the camera.
Yummy!
Let's look at the camera stabilization at various focal lengths and see how steady you can hold this baby without a tripod.
1,000. 1,500. 2,000.
So there you have it. A tripod would be better, but it's still usable footage. Well, we're almost at the end of the video, and I promised you'll be able to watch me make a fool of myself, and I'm going to keep my promise. But first, here I am at 24 millimeters, right across the lake with a wireless mic.
And now, magically, we are at 100 millimeters. Still not all that tight, and again, I'm pretty far away, so let's step it up a little bit. Okay, and now we are at 500 millimeters from the Nikon P950, and you're starting to see the benefit of this super zoom camera come into play. Now we are at 1,000 millimeters. I have not moved, still the P950 at 1,000 millimeters. Now let's go to 1,500. And now, pushing the limit of the P950, we're at 1,500 millimeters with the P950 in Central Park. Finally, we're going to go to 2,000 millimeters now. And probably more than you'll ever need, but this gives you an idea from full wide to full zoom, what this camera is capable of.
Oh yes, a big range.
And I should let you know that with 2,000 subscribers or thereabout, more or less, depending on when you watch this video, I'm a bit of a celebrity, and in this big city here at Central Park, I'm almost certain that someone's going to come up to me because they recognize me of who I am and with the channel Tech to Remember. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened yet, to be honest with you, but I'm sure it will. People, you know, sometimes can be a little bit shy, or they can be a little, you know, they don't want to seem like, you know, they're intimidated by talking to a celebrity, so.
That is the reason.
It's a beautiful day, huh?
Really nice.
Yeah.
Not too hot.
You don't recognize me, do you, by any chance?
No.
Do I look familiar to you guys, by any chance?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
I have a YouTube channel. I thought people would recognize me, but no one's recognizing me.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
We don't really watch YouTube all that much.
Oh, you don't? Everybody watches YouTube. Do you guys recognize me from YouTube?
No.
No. Okay. I think I need more subscribers. All right. Thank you.
Well, you have 3 strikes.
So is the Nikon P950 a camera for you? Well, if you're into wildlife and birding, then the answer is definitely yes. But even if you're not, the camera is actually light enough and small enough now to carry around with you to travel. You don't have to carry multiple lenses. This one incredible range covers it all. Family events, birthdays, celebrations, everyday photography. This camera now, being that it's so much smaller than the P1000 and really upgraded from the P900, really makes a very exciting choice. The built-in flash is really nice too. Hey, you don't have to carry extra lenses, extra flashes, but I do recommend you carry an extra battery because these batteries don't go very far. And by the way, don't necessarily trust the battery indicator because sometimes it could be at half and then all of a sudden drop to like nothing. I've had that happen, especially if it's an off-brand battery, not an original Nikon battery. You don't want to get caught short and be really disappointed because you ran out of juice so fast. I wouldn't snub my nose at this camera. It shoots RAW now, 4K 30 video. It's a nice size and weight and easy to carry around and really versatile. So if you've gotten something out of this video, please hit like and subscribe. I'm going to be releasing another video, it may already be out by the time you're seeing this, going into some hidden tricks and features and going through the menus and how to use this camera and get the most out of it into more specific details. So thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Go ahead.
I said it.
Say it. Go one more time.
Is that a Nikon P950?
950.
Is that a Nikon 950?
Yes, it is.
That's very nice.